That sky. Got some creaky chairs, and beautiful blue skies. It's been a little while since I did a live chat with you guys, and the irony of the chat that we're about to have, kind of is going to encapsulate how we're communicating. So, this morning I shared a video on Instagram. Wasn't my video. It was a tale of a man who recently in Asheville, North Carolina, got into some type of verbal altercation over a parking space at a Sam's Club. Somebody took his parking space, and ultimately the man that he had a verbal altercation with, good morning everybody, followed him to the store. This guy's got his family with him, followed him up to the store and shot him, drew a pistol and shot him. They didn't fight. There wasn't like a physical altercation. It was just, hey man, you took my parking space, F you, blah, blah, blah. Good morning. And this guy walks up and shoots him in the hip. The reason that it was newsworthy is it's a misdemeanor. So this guy is being charged with a misdemeanor. Probably will do no jail time, according to the news report, for shooting another man with a pistol over a parking spot. As I look at this, I'm in my mid-40s. It reminded me as a kid, you'd hear about somebody committing a crime, right? Just think this through. You'd hear about somebody committing a crime, like somebody robbed someone or robbed a bank, right? And you just assume that person's going to go to jail for so long. Somebody shot somebody, murder or attempted murder. It's like, wow, their life is over. Well, not in this new world that we've created, not in this new society that we've created, not in this new system that's being created. And people that are in our sphere, I guess I would say those of us that love freedom, that love liberty, that love the tenets and concepts that our forefathers created, this idea of dangerous liberty, not dangerous because the world is dangerous, but dangerous in the sense that I am willing to live my life as I see fit and accept the world as it comes. Marcos Santiago. Accept the world as it comes. And if something bad happens to me, like I'm out here, check this out. I'm out in the West today. I'm in Cottonwood, Arizona, which is right outside of Sedona, not far from Flagstaff, little town of Jerome. People came out here and they settled this land and they died, right? They died. You travel to West, you go anywhere in the world, but where humans endeavor to set off and create new things, they are risking their life in this search of whatever it is that they're looking for, how they choose to live their life. And that is really the encapsulation of what our American dream is or was. And we look at this reinventing of America. I've got some friends on here that are coppers and they know exactly what I'm talking about. We have created a situation now where criminals have, in many cases, as many rights or more rights than the people they're victimizing. Of course, we all have rights under the Constitution, right to a fair trial, right to remain silent, all those types of things. I'm not even just talking about the Bill of Rights, but the things that we give to people until they have a trial, right? We're innocent until proven guilty by a jury of our peers, right? We have a right to a speedy trial, etc. But in this day and age, it has now come full circle where the criminal, the aggressor, the people committing the crime oftentimes have more rights than the people that they're victimizing. And we look at this and it's pretty plain to see what's happening. Systematically, though anti-gun, anti-American, anti-freedom, anti-republic, not Republican, republic faction of our society is systematically in a multi-generational way, multi-generational. This isn't something that we can just do in a week. This has taken years. When I shared that post this morning, came to mind, excuse me, we see these these little memes, right, where somebody's like, if you drank out of a garden hose when you were a kid, you were like me. You were born in the 80s. Or if you played and were told you got to stay outside till dark, you were like me. That is uh, true. We have created a world where children, our children, your and my children, like a friend of mine on here, had a little baby not too long ago. How we raise these kids is what's created this world around them. We are plugging them into this virtual world, disconnecting them from this natural world, disconnecting them from the communication between people. I'm a big fan of you. And we are creating a society where we are no longer penalizing criminals, we are victimizing the general public, and we are brainwashing our children as they become voters themselves. Here's the end game. They will no longer need the Second Amendment because it does not suit their way of life. We will have completely revamped as a society what liberty means. I'm with a bunch of Canadians this week, a bunch of coppers from Canada that are down here training jiu-jitsu with us, and we are talking about their society. The Canadian people, for generations, were a freedom-loving people. The history of the Hudson Bay Company, for example. I mean, these were rugged, tough people that lived in the bush, trapping, hunting, fishing. They have completely castrated their society of the right to think. One of them told me yesterday that there is a new faction of government that can come into your business, access the hard drive of your computer. This is coming from law enforcement up there, so this isn't just crap that somebody read on the internet. This organization of government can go in, look at your computers, and if they find anything that's not the speech that the government wants, they can shut you down, fine you, and imprison you. That sounds like Italy in World War II. That sounds like Russia when Stalin was in office. That sounds like China when Mao was in power. That sounds like Germany when Hitler came to power. I'm not saying that that's where America is, but who's to blame? We in this community, we sit here and we say, they are doing this, they are doing this, they are doing this. I was with these Canadians last night, and I love these guys, and I said, what can you do about it? And they're like, nothing, eh? We can't do nothing. Just get some Molsons. I'm just joking, doing my Canadian accent. They're whipped. They're whipped. So many years, they are whipped. They're whipped here, and they're whipped here. So before I was Mr. Carry Trainer, which is so douchey, but before I did this for a living, at the same time, I helped run political campaigns. I was the vice chair of a political party. I helped raise money. I didn't get paid for any of it, so it's quite easy for me to talk about. I never received a single dime, but we helped run campaigns. From the localist tiny campaign, a friend of mine, we helped get on the city council in my community, school boards, mayors, county board. Depending on where you live in the country, you may have different names for these things, like selectmen. A lot of times in the East Coast states, instead of city council, they have selectmen. Instead of a state's attorney, like by me, you may have a district attorney. All of these local races matter. They matter hugely. The judges that are elected in your community matter hugely. Now, right now we have a sickness where people, they think the elections are all rigged. I don't want to make this discussion about that. I have sat through recounts of elections where I was physically in the clerk's office for days, had to sit quiet and just watch. Basically an observer, which is allowed by law, and you watch them go through every paper ballot. And there is a chain of custody where these ballots are moved around and they're locked up, and perhaps you can verify a signature, check to make sure somebody's alive, check an address. It's a very tedious and time-consuming process. It's also very easy to cheat, and it's very hard to cheat. What do I mean by that? It's very easy to cheat, like you could just create fake ballots, but it's very easy to validate whether or not the information, or invalidate whether or not that information is true and accurate. I don't want to make this about elections, but is it possible to swing elections nefariously? Yes. But there is oftentimes Occam's razor, right? Occam's razor. Simplest explanation is usually the best explanation. And of course, Occam's razor has got a lot more to it than that, but look that up. Usually the simplest explanation is probably the best explanation. For example, you're in a new house, you hear some creaky noise at night, and you immediately jump to the conclusion that the house is haunted and there is a monster in the closet. Or the simplest explanation is it's an old house. As the air cools around the house, the framework in the house settles, and it makes some creaking noises. And because it's new to you, it can be frightening. It's probably not a monster or a ghost. It's probably just wood members squeaking against one another, right? That is the problem here. We jump to these far-fetched conclusions, and we are unwilling to accept the very real possibility that there's not a monster in the closet, but instead there is just natural things happening. And what do I mean by that? I mean people are effing lazy. In the state of Illinois, I was very deeply involved in the movement to pass concealed carry. So the state of Illinois was the very last state in the nation to have some type of codified law for concealed carry. It doesn't mean it was the best law. So there's other places like New Jersey just got concealed carry. We were the last one to actually have any kind of a law on the books. It was just a blanket, no guns for anybody unless you're a copper to carry. People told us you'll never pass that. People told us it's never going to happen. People told us you're wasting your time. It's been tried before. Well, we got it done. It was about 10, 12 years ago. It happened in multiple ways. So oftentimes we think we just need a new governor. We just need a new president. Well, no, we have the legislative side of the house. We have the executive side. So legislative would be Congress or your state house. Executive, your governor, the president. And then we have the judicial branch. The judicial branch of government, as we all know, interprets the law. So when a lawmaker or a president or a governor, like we just saw in New Mexico, tries to create some type of executive order or some piece of legislation, the judicial branch says, hey, wait a second, let's compare what you guys are doing or gals are doing to the Constitution, and we'll see if it's lawful. Who puts those people in office? You and me. Now, at a higher level, they are appointed by elected officials. At a lower level, most of the time these people are elected. So, like in a county level judge, circuit judge, those judges often get voted on by the sitting judges. So you'll have like an old judge that's been there forever, the guy that you've seen for years or gal you've seen for years. Oftentimes, once a judge, always a judge until you retire. So one of these judges decides to retire. There's a good guy or girl in the community that starts lobbying to the judges to say, pick me, pick me, pick me. I'd be a good new judge. And these people usually, as they start out, they're looking at traffic cases and very low-level civil stuff so they can build their chops as a judge. And then they make their way up, and eventually they become part of that group of judges that picks the next judge. But to keep that job, they've got to get voted in. The general public doesn't pay much attention to that. This is just one part of this discussion. Why are you not paying attention to the people that are going to say whether or not some scumbag at the Sam's Club goes to jail? The state's attorney, the district attorney, the guy or girl that is going to say, yes, we will levy charges and go to a grand jury and say, here are the charges we're bringing against this individual. Here's why we feel they should be locked up. Here's why we feel they should go to trial. Here's why we feel that we should seek the incarceration or death penalty or whatever. That guy or girl is elected by you and me. The sheriff, whose deputies go out and do the investigations and arrests, and at county level, the sheriff is elected. The police chief of your community, your village, your town is appointed by usually the city council, but oftentimes on a more micro level, the mayor and the city manager are really doing the heavy lifting of hiring that mayor. I'm sorry, that police chief. It's oftentimes a very political position. Who do you know? I've got a police chief near home that we're going to have to remove. How do we do that? Well, we've got to start talking to the city council people in that community. We've got to start talking to the mayor, the city manager. And we don't say, hey, we're going to remove the police chief, but we're going to say, look, here's why we're unhappy with this person. Here's what's not happened thus far. Here's some things that we're seeing in the community that we don't like. Here's some things that we'd like to see. And thus far, our requests to see these types of things have been met with resistance. Enough time has elapsed, so it's time that we find a new police chief. Oftentimes, a city manager, a city councilman, a mayor is going to say, tap, tap on the head, that's very nice, young citizen, not a big deal. Here's the magic sauce. Hey, mayor, I know you're coming up for election here in 6 months or next year, and I just want to let you know that I'm going to do everything in my power, which is quite vast, to remove you from office. I think you're a fine human being. I just don't think you're a fine mayor. So you better dig your heels in, because I'm going to dig mine in, and me and mine are going to work really, really hard, and we're going to remove you. We're going to put somebody in that doesn't do what we want, but they're going to do what is needed. I don't want to put somebody in that does what I want. I want them to do what is right, what is just, based on the Constitution, based on the will of the people, coupled to the Constitution. See, because if we just go to the will of the people, which is kind of what we're doing now, we have democracy. And democracy is really a form of tyranny by the masses. I have people that argue here on YouTube or other places, well, we are a democracy. We are 100% absolutely not a democracy. We are indeed a republic. We vote with a democratic voting process, but we are not a democracy. The Constitution upholds the individual's right. Everybody in the entire country could say Mickey's wrong. But that Constitution, this beautifully enshrined document, is the mirror with which we reflect the right and wrong. That Constitution, that codified document that spells out what the rights of the individual are, it is how we go about judging whether or not somebody should be in office, if somebody's actions are right and just and pure. And that changes too, right? That's in flux. There was a time that if my skin was darker than this, the Constitution did not protect me at all or in the same way. Out here in the lands that I'm in Arizona today, the indigenous peoples that lived here were subjugated and treated like complete trash, and that Constitution did not take them into account. It does today. So I don't look at the optics of history, or rather the facts of history, through the optics or light of today, through the knowledge of today. I can look at it through the optics and knowledge of today and see how we have improved, but I'm not a fool to just say, here's what was written in 1778, 1780, 1790, and this is what we're going to do forever. Because things do change, and there is a fallacy to that. And this is where the left, the anti-gun, often leverages their points. And people on our side, if there is sides, sometimes do not look at it in such a nuanced way. Imagine a teeter-totter that like you play with on a kid's swing set. Rather than look at it like two warring factions shooting hot, fiery arrows at each other, think about it like a teeter-totter. And it's constantly in flux. And as more weight comes to one side of the teeter-totter, right, I have a better argument. I win. Oop, you move farther back on the teeter-totter. You change the fulcrum point. You win, right? As knowledge, as work changes, right? So, when you're sitting on a teeter-totter, the closer you move to that pivot point, the less your weight can affect the opposite. The farther you move away from that pivot point, the more your weight can affect what's happening on the other side. We are lazy. Back to the point of Illinois, and I've talked about this in these discussions before. In Illinois, we have a licensing scheme. It's a superfluous, I would almost call it criminal licensing scheme. Some of you East Coasters have it, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, some of you states. In Illinois, it's called a FOID card, Firearm Owner Identification Card. FOID was created in 1968 during the Gun Control Act. So the people in Illinois, when the 1968 Gun Control Act, which was it was done in response to the Kennedys and Martin Luther King being assassinated, people in Illinois are like, hey, let's jump on this and pass some sweet anti-gun legislation. Is the airplane too loud? I apologize. We created this anti-gun climate in Illinois. Illinois, like a lot of states, is full of beautiful people, beautiful places. Most of Illinois is completely rural with good, hardworking, freedom-loving, liberty-loving families that are out working the fields, building, growing. And then you've got Chicago, which is a amazing city with amazing museums and music and restaurant. But it is also run with a iron-like grip of anti-American hatred for the way you and I live. And it bleeds into the rest of our society like putting dye into water. It's like, if you've ever been to Chicago, we dye the Chicago River green. Lots of Irishmen in Chicago, which were another completely subjugated people. They dye that river green. It doesn't take a lot of dye to dye the entire river. They dump that stuff in there and it makes its way out into the river and colors the whole river green for St. Patrick's Day, right? In these places like Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Seattle, Denver, these strongholds of liberalism, which used to be a good thing. It used to be a good thing. My grandfather was a staunch Democrat who worked his ass off and would not for a second look at what we're doing in our country today and condone it. As a young man, my grandfather came here to America from Europe, worked his ass off, retired with a goodly sum of cash as a typesetter. He worked for a large company and made the little metal typesets that made all the magazines and newspapers possible. Print was killed by the digital age, but he was a tradesman. Never made a lot of money. You know, I made more money as a young carpenter than my grandfather ever made, but he worked his ass off, saved his money, believed in liberty, believed in helping others, and he was a staunch Democrat. That has changed. Now, the Democratic Party also is the party that continued to enslave the American blacks. The Democratic Party was the same party that created the Jim Crow laws. The Democratic Party was the same party that wanted to create laws that stopped the blacks after the abolition of slavery, from having access to firearms, from having access to voting, to having access to land ownership. This is factual. This isn't Mickey Shook just pulling crap out of thin air. Nor is this a speech about let's go vote Republican. The people that came out here, I was up in Jerome, Arizona yesterday. If you've never been, it's a beautiful town, little mining town up in the hills up here. These people hewed with axes and chisels a life out of the rocks. This stuff is everywhere around the world, right? We have it so easy now. We are giving our children this life. This life, oftentimes, it's better than the one that I had. What's better? I'm out with people last night. We're down here doing a jiu-jitsu camp. Beautiful people, some of my very closest and dearest friends in the world. And it breaks my heart. We're sitting having meals, looking at the hillside, and half the people are on their phones. Whose choice is that? I know you might be doing a work email. Maybe you got to send your wife or kids a message. We are so connected that we are disconnected at the same time. We are so connected that we are disconnected. History isn't told correctly. History also isn't read correctly. Whose responsibility is it to study history? It's yours. It is our responsibility to deduce. The word educate comes from the word educo, to draw out. Matt, I'm not sure what you're talking about with indentured servitude, but I've spent the better part of 20 years studying this stuff. So if we're talking about the Irish or something else along the lines of slavery, I don't know if that's where you're going, but that's not what I'm making this about. All presidents from Washington to Lincoln were swarthy complexion. Okay, cool. Race is a construct. Melanin is a compound that affects our skin color. If you were born in Nigeria, Switzerland, Australia, if you were an indigenous person from the lands of North America or South America or the Arctic plains of Russia, we are all human beings. That said, this concept of race and people wanting to separate themselves based on it's disgusting to me. It's annoying. It's sophomoric. It's injurious to our culture. It's very limiting. It's very weak. It's a weak-minded argument. Yes, I'm proud of my heritage. I'm a freaking American. Back to the point. We look at what's happening, and what we are doing as a society is we are creating a situation where people need the help of government. We no longer need our firearms. We need, hear me out, government to solve these problems. We need government to pay our bills. We need government to give us health care. We need government to tell us what we should do and what we shouldn't do. We need government to tell us to cover our face up. We need government to tell us what kind of vehicle to buy and how to drive it and where to park it and whether to plug it in or pump some liquid into it. We need government to tell us how big our houses can be or shouldn't be. We need government to tell us how to educate our children, when they're going to be there, when they're going to go home, whether or not they're going to listen to this or that or read this or that. We need government for everything, and that's a choice. Government has a very simple charter. It's to protect these borders, to protect us here. That's one of the main charters of government, to create an environment for you and I to live as we see fit, where my actions, here's the problem. So here I'm in a rental house, but as soon as I start throwing my garbage over the fence into one of these houses, I have now violated this contract, this social contract that some people say is also a construct. If we look at some of the men that the founders read, like John Locke, for example, or Hobbes, and just because I name these people doesn't mean that I agree with everything that these philosophers wrote about, but they're worth us reading about. Machiavelli, this contract that we have in society, it's a play on words, but we understand that if I start throwing garbage over the neighbor's fence, there's going to be a problem. At the very least, the neighbor's going to come and say, hey man, can you stop throwing garbage? And if I keep doing it, he's going to have some words with me. If I keep doing it, he's going to call the police. If I keep doing it, the police are going to levy a fine against me. If I keep doing it, he's going to sue me, right? There is these ramifications. If I keep doing it, something will happen. Why? Because we as a society say that individual's rights to protect what's his inside of that yard is so important that we create all of these things, lawsuits, fines, imprisonment, etc., that we can help him enshrine that little place that's his. You're very intelligent, but color isn't race, but great content as always. No, I'm saying it is a construct. So because we drew fake lines on a map, I've got a sister-in-law from Uganda. Because we drew fake lines on a map and said this side of the line is Uganda and this side of the line is another country. They're different peoples? No. Yes, we have different facial features maybe when you live in different parts of the world. People from China have a liver. People in Greece have ears. I'm not trying to come off like I'm a medical doctor or a geneticist, but when we continue to go back to this circle jerk wasted conversation about the content of melanin in our skin, I've got no desire to talk to you anymore. It is completely useless. Completely useless. That said, back to the point. We have given up this concept that I should protect my neighbor. We've given up this right, or this concept rather, that I as a neighbor should help my neighbors do what's right. We are creating this generation now, and this isn't a dig on the generation, it's a dig on you and me, on our parents. We want more. We want bigger houses. We want more stuff. We want fancier electronics. We want more vacations. All good stuff. I got two nephews in college. Their college education combined every year is more than most people earn in a complete year. We have created a society, and that's, somebody could say, well, that's the education system's problem. Nobody's making us go to college and get these degrees that oftentimes are very useless. We are continuing to feed into a system that is making us reliant on the system. We are continuing to feed into a banking system, an education system, a governmental system, a taxing system, a communication system that censors us, that controls us, that dictates our way of life. Oh, Mickey, you can't talk about or show this on your social media, otherwise we're going to shut off your bank account. It's happened. We're going to shut off your ability to commit or do commerce, no, not commit, but to make bank transactions. If you don't do what the rest of us collectively think you're going to do, or should do rather, we're going to shut you down. We're going to stop you. We're going to deplatform you. That's become a new word, deplatform you. You know, it's like take you off of your pulpit where people can't hear or see you. We are doing that. And we are creating an environment that is rich for passing this information on to our children. Your kids are living off TikTok. Your kids are living off YouTube. Your kids are living off Facebook. Your kids are living off Instagram. Your kids are living off media feeds that are now beyond me that I don't even know about because I'm too old with all this gray hair. Your children are eating crap. Your children are learning crap. Maybe not yours, but when I say yours, I'm saying mine, ours. Your children are, this isn't about religion. This is about our very way of life and this concept of liberty. Patrick Henry's speech that is oft repeated, people quote the last of it, give me liberty or give me death. How about how he started that speech? He said, why do we sit here idly, bullshitting here in this room? We're sitting here yelling at each other while our brothers are already out in the field. Our brothers are already out there going to battle. I've spent the better part of my adult life studying the American Revolution, the men involved, the women involved, the things that they thought about. They were such learned people in the sense of philosophy, this quest for knowledge. You know, Jefferson wrote a letter, I believe it was to Adams, I believe, don't quote me on it, but in that letter, he had said, Jefferson said, it is not for us when we are dead to tell the living how to live. It's for the living to create the world we want. We today continue to look back at what they did and we just put it on their shoulders. Continue to carry this load for me. I've got this opinion. I think about liberty as a wheelbarrow. Somebody went and dug this stuff, this beautiful stuff of liberty out of the ground, and they put it in the wheelbarrow and they started carrying it up one of these mountains. And they carried it so far. And we inherited it. And we have been resting on how much of that beautiful, sweet liberty they carried up the hill. And we're like, get me some more. Get me some more of that. Bring it to me. Feed it to me. Wash it. Saute it perfectly. Feed me that stuff. When is it our job to go out into the field? I'm not talking about war. This is the stupid thing, too. People in this space are like, oh, the tree of liberty's got to be watered, blah, blah, blah. Forgetting that for years, year after year after year after year, the tireless few worked their butts off with little money, with little support, to create this republic, this union of states, of the colonies. I have visited at least 30, I believe 32, of the graves of the signers of our Declaration. when I find one near me, I have read about all these men numerous times, but you don't remember everything, so I'll read about them. And then I'll go visit the grave, and I will sit a spell and I think about who these men were, who the women were that were in their life. Some of them were slaveholders, some of them were farmers, some of them were shopkeepers. But I think about who these men were. What stirred in their guts? What stirred in their guts enough that they didn't sit idly by? Enough that talk became action. Enough that they gave up pretty much the totality of their lives, carrying this beautiful, sweet load for you and I on our behalf, so that I can sit here today under this beautiful blue sky looking at these beautiful mountains, living as I see fit. I mean, that's staggering to me. And then there's men that we don't even remember, that we don't talk of, that we should honor in our homes, that we should tell our children about as they go to sleep, that we should sit our sons around campfires and tell them these people's names. Men like Morgan and Knox, and who's the one I just was reading on again recently? The Marbleheaders. These guys, we don't even think of these men because history's written by the famous guys like Washington, and these guys were beautiful. They were lovely men. But then you've got guys like Knox, for example. I'll talk about him for a second. Henry Knox, a bookkeeper. A bookkeeper traveled several hundred miles in the winter without roads from Boston to Fort Ticonderoga. Read the book, Knox's Noble Train. Traveled there in wintertime, procured oxes and horses, went to the fort that the British were occupying, took the fort. Thankfully, the British didn't put up much of a fight. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of cannon they drug several hundred miles back over the Berkshire Mountains in winter, having to cut down trees to build sleds, having to wait for creeks to freeze and rivers to freeze so that they could cross the river. And when they got back to Boston after weeks of tireless work, they didn't say, "General Washington, we need a break." Nope. The bookkeeper Knox, who had no real training or experience in artillery but taught himself from books, climbed up onto the heights and took the men. This is the Boston Harbor was besieged by the British at the time. And under the cloak of darkness at night, they quietly pickaxed the frozen earth, and they built ramparts, and they drug with block and tackle these thousands of pounds of huge cannons up the hill. And he had read how to use these things, and he said, all right, tilt them up about that much and stick that powder in. And at daybreak, they began bombing their own town of Boston, and they drove the British out. His own bookstore was in that town. Their homes were in that town. But they drove the British out. These are the kind of men that I'm talking about. John Glover in the Marbleheaders. John Glover was a fisherman. He was a colonel. If it wasn't for Henry Knox and John Glover, two important figures, and I just want to talk about them for a minute because most of us don't know their names. Their names should be written on the walls of all of our homes. Their names should be inscribed on buildings, and they are in some places. Their names should be on our lips daily, because we would not have this country if it wasn't for Morgan and Knox. The crossing of the Delaware, the famous picture that you see of General Washington in that boat on Christmas Eve, Christmas night, crossing of the Delaware, that only happened because of Morgan. Not Morgan. I just said it, now my brain went blank. Don't you hate when that happens? I've been on the road too long. That's terrible. These are the guys that weren't afraid to step out of their skin and get their hands dirty. Yeah, 100%. And this isn't about, again, I'm not bringing this stuff up from the sense of let's go to war. That's not what I'm talking about. But if they could do that, how much more can we do? How much more are we capable of? How much more are we do we owe? How much more do we owe? How much more do our children are they owed from us? How much are our grandchildren owed? It's sad. It's frightening. And these guys didn't look for fame and fortune. For Glover, who I was just talking about, went back to his job as a fisherman. This guy says, I guess the question is, do you believe your future is in the hands of others, or do you believe your future is in your hands? Well, that's an interesting discussion. Our future is in everybody's hands at all times. You allow your future every time you get on the road to be in somebody else's hands. Every time you open up food and eat it, that you didn't procure every bit of that food, you put your future in somebody else's hands. Every time you climb up a flight of stairs, get in an elevator, every time you do pretty much anything, you are putting your future in somebody else's hands. So I think there's 2 or 3 ways to look at that question. What are we capable of? We're capable of a lot. All of us are capable of excuses. All of us are capable of apathy. All of us are capable of kicking the can down the road. All of us are capable of blaming the universe, where we were born, government. All of us are capable of hope. All of us are capable of digging a little deeper. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, a man is what he or she, I'll paraphrase him, he said, a man is what he thinks about all day long. Abraham Lincoln said, a man is about as happy as he makes up his mind to be. It's pretty good stuff. The scripture says, as a man thinketh, so shall he be. So back in the book of Proverbs, people in the ancient times understood this. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic, he understood it. Emerson, the great writer, he understood it. Yet we keep giving our ability to control our destiny to somebody else. There was a huge switch in my life. I was about 29 years old, and I had made the same choices over and over. And let me predicate what I'm about to say on this. I'm nobody from nowhere. I don't come into this platform and have this conversation like I'm somebody that I'm some guru or I know something. I am a man like the rest of you that makes mistakes and looks in the mirror and tries to do better, that wants to leave the world in a better place. And I am sharing my experiences, and that's all. So I'm not saying I figured something out that nobody else has, nor do I feel like I am better or more capable than anybody else. All I can talk about is my experiences. But one day I'm in the shower. I've shared this before. Oftentimes it chokes me up to remember it, not because it's sad, but because it was such a pivotal point in my own experience, my journey, my life. I had found myself time and again in the same spot, the same frustrated spot, blowing up a relationship, being broke, being depressed or angry. And this isn't self-help talk, but I had found myself in the same spot over and over again. I started to think about it. Like, what is my role in this? Well, it's everything. It's everything. I didn't just drop into this town from Chicago. I booked a flight and came here, right? We put ourselves wherever we are. And I had to really own that with a ragged responsibility Yes, my parents did things. Yes, I was born in a certain place at a certain time. Yes, I was born at a certain height, weight, etc. I'm not going to be in the NBA if I was born 3 feet tall, probably, right? I'm not going to be in the NFL if I'm 100 feet tall. Probably not going to be a great dancer if I'm really overweight, right? I've got certain things. We all have certain things that were dictated to us, but it was deeper than that. I keep finding myself in the same spot, these bad places, and I was like just so frustrated of it. Like, what the hell? And I wanted to do the things that we're talking about. And the biggest problem was this: I didn't believe I could. At the end of the day, I wanted to do a lot of things, but I did not believe that little Mickey had a place to do that. I saw myself as a tertiary player, a secondary player. I saw myself as just some guy on the periphery clapping for the guy on stage. I saw myself as the guy that was in the back of the line. I saw myself as somebody other than the dude that was asking for the sale. That's our thoughts. Our thoughts are things. Our thoughts are things. Our thoughts, everything that we have starts as a thought. Everything that we are starts as a thought. Our founders knew this. If you read the correspondence between these men, it stirs your guts because it's all that they thought about, it's all that they knew. They knew that the things that they were doing were going to change the course of events, not just for the colonies, but for the world. They knew it. They believed it. They lived it. And now we sit here idle. As our brethren of the past were in the fields, we sit here idly blaming others, and then the example that we show our children, we show our employees, we show the people around us, is living in the same fashion as all these people that we don't agree with. We're doing the same shit. We're spending our time buried in social media. We're not helping good candidates get elected. That doesn't mean just voting. It means actually doing something. What's that look like? So if Vigor Mindset was running for office and we liked him and we thought he should be a good mayor or congressman, people that know him need to go out and ask their friends to vote for him. And they need to learn why. And then they should tell Vigor, friend, we're going to help you. But Vigor, if you don't do what you say you're going to do, we're going to remove you. We expect you, Vigor, to uphold the oath. And then the oath goes something like this, not just the one that they have you say when you swear in, but this one. I'm going to kick ass for you people. You're my neighbors. You're my people. I'm going to go to city council or to the mayor's job or to the president's job, and I'm going to uphold this oath for you because I know that's why you brought me here. And if I don't do it, yank me out. And then you say, I'm gonna yank you out. And then you go out and you work your ass off and you get them elected. We've done it too many times, me and my people, from state reps to Congress people to sheriffs to state's attorneys to city council people to county board people. We've done it too many times and won for me to believe that we collectively, we've got these different groups, NRA, gun policy, right? All these different legislative groups. Here's the problem. They're all good people. They get, and I'm not pointing fingers at any one of them. People have to be paid. People, and they should be paid. People have to be paid. People have different agendas. The agenda needs to be this, and this is why we won our liberty. The agenda was this. Yes, we're fighting about how the Bill of Rights, should it be written, should it not be written. We're fighting about the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. They're two great divergent concepts, but there was one thing that we agreed on: liberty. This most beautiful thing. You cannot worship without it. You cannot raise a family as you see fit without it. You cannot chase your dreams without it. And as much as there's young people now, they are being bred and brainwashed to hate our country, to apologize for our country. Look at comments online of foreigners talking about America. And these people forget that our country has given more in aid to the rest of the world combined. Our country has spilled the blood of our sons and daughters more than the rest of the world combined in defense of others. Not even of our own shores, but in defense of others. We have done that. While that stuff you may not always agree with, the fact is your tax dollars did that. The work of your hands at your factory, at your mechanic shop, at your bakery, at the school you work at the church you preach at the synagogue that you minister from, at the lawn that you're cutting, right? The sky that you're flying people or cargo in. You created those funds through the sweat of your life, the very passing of time that is your life. You did that. And then these people are going to talk ill of us. Have we brought some evil to the world? Of course. Of course. This is not the discussion. We could sit down and we could pick every country and we could find, let's talk about Britain and their colonization of the planet. Let's talk about the Spaniards and the Inquisition, right? Let's talk about Mao killing more people in the friggin' 20th century than anybody. Millions and millions of people he starved to death. Mao did, right? Or the millions that died under Stalin, right? We could talk about all of these things, but that's not the point. That gets nothing done. This quest for liberty creates a space where the next generation can have these same conversations and they can think. The part that we're missing is we have plugged ourselves into these machines, and it's not a conspiracy. You're doing it. Nobody's making you do it. Nobody is making you do this. Nobody is forcing you to even engage. These platforms can be used for good and they can be used for evil. Your vehicle can be used for good, it can be used for evil. Your gun can be used for good, it can be used for evil. Food can be used for good, it can make you fat and kill you. Alcohol can be good, it can kill you, right? We are choosing this. Who we vote for matters. Who we stand up for matters. What we stand up for matters. What we teach our kids matters. And it has to be more than just being loud Facebook posts. There has to be work. Nothing will grow in your garden unless you till it, remove the rocks, amend the soil, plant the seeds, water them, keep the weeds out. That is what our founders did. That was the actions that they did for 20-something years. And as these men faded off into the stars, as the spark of life left them and they went back to this space, who carries that load on our behalf? Put your hand on the fucking plow. But there's another version of the truth where you don't have to read between the lines, where people have MOS, like for real. I don't know what that means. I don't speak in those. I don't know what you're saying, Jimmy Jones. Here's the truth. Here is the truth. There is no truth but this. You either do or you do not. You either complain or you do. You either inject yourself into this race of life or you are a spectator on the periphery. That is it. That is it. I don't know what you're saying, Jimmy Jones. I don't know what that means. I'm not able to communicate as I have been and read what you're saying. If you want to send me a message, be my guest. I'm happy to read it. Who will stand up? Who will stand in the breach, in this gulf between the people that want to strip us of our way of life, which is their right to do by the very words of our founders? It's that teeter-totter, that give and take. We either raise a society of people that love freedom, that love liberty, that want to create a society where we can still continue that, or we allow mayhem, mob action, the unrule of law, which is what's happening, where streets and cities are being victimized, vandalized, terrorized by people at every turn, and we don't do anything about it. E pluribus unum. Do you guys know what that means? E pluribus unum? Does anybody know what e pluribus unum means? The first person to answer me what e pluribus unum means, I will send you a t-shirt. And the only way I can do it is the first name that pops up on the screen. Who knows what e pluribus unum means? Let's see it. Anybody? It's on your money. It's inscribed through all of our public places. No one? E pluribus unum, right there. The provoked word. Send me an email to training@carrytrainer.com. Training@carrytrainer.com. Out of many is the one. They knew, and that quiver of arrows, they represent the colonies. That wasn't a quiver. It wasn't a quiver of lollipops. It wasn't a quiver of cold beers. It wasn't a quiver or a fistful in that eagle's hand of pebbles. It was arrows, right? We're at jiu-jitsu today. I'm going to have to leave here in a minute. I got to get over there. We use this term fight up, wrestle up. We're working on a video right now of some ground fighting we just did at a recent class. I taught 24 hours of it, getting up off the ground. And we say, fight up, get up. You're in a diminished position. You got knocked down. You got to fight up. Who's going to get you up? Somebody going to come and help you? Somebody going to come into that parking lot and that proverbial fight happens and help you up? Or do you have to fight up? Do you have to get up? Your kids are counting on you. People say the founders would turn over in their graves. I don't know if they would. I've read so many of their lives. I don't know if they would. I think they would say this is what we thought would happen because we knew what humans do. Fight up. Fight up. Get up. I'm not saying get up and shake your fist. I'm saying get a plan for how you are going to inject yourself into the races for every single office that matters, from the city council to the school board to the county board to your governor. And then you're going to spend all your free time for the next year working on this. You're going to call people at the Tea Party, Independent Party, Republican Party, Democratic Party, and you're going to say, I want to talk to these candidates in person. I want to figure out who I want to support because it's my life I'm about to trade. I'm going to bargain away a chunk of my life so that I can protect what's going on over that neighbor's fence and over that neighbor's fence, so I can protect the home that my kids are going to grow up in, so that I can protect what's coming next. If you don't, then who? If not you, then who? If it wasn't for those 56 men back in time that are now scattered back to the stars, if it wasn't for them, then who? Who would have done it? Who would have got together in Boston and in Philly and sat down and put pen to paper? Who would have done it? Who would have done it? It's just some other people. They would have just come out of the hills. Some other shopkeepers like Knox would have said, General Washington, I'll cross the Berkshires in winter, and I will go to Fort Ticonderoga, where I might die at the hands of the British. And hopefully when I get there, we get these cannons, and hopefully I get back. You know what he said? He goes, I can do it, sir. Who, if not for John Glover and his fishermen? Read about what he did on Long Island. If not for him, I believe it was 800 Marbleheaders, his Marbleheaders, against 4,000 or more British. He held them at bay with guerrilla warfare. These guys danced from rock wall to rock wall, appearing in swamps, in just suppressing the British for hour after hour after hour, as Washington's army was able to retreat across a low-tide swamp. Without that action, without his thinking, his cunning, he did that. Washington didn't do it. Washington was a very terrible strategist. A fisherman did that. A fisherman. 800 of the Marbleheaders against thousands of some of the most trained soldiers on the planet. The Hessians, mercenaries from Germany, and the British regulars. 800 against thousands. Look that up. Read about that. Who will do that. Who's going to do that? If it wasn't for Glover that said, I got this, sir, let me handle this, all would have been lost. There would have been nothing. The British would have swept in, they would have taken Washington's army, and the rebellion would have been crushed, and we would not be having this conversation today, and the world would be a completely different place. Warrior servant of Yah, founding fathers were deists, they were not true believers. I could give two shits about such a comment because liberty has nothing to do with being a true believer. In fact, that type of comment is the exact discourse that takes us from the course. It's the exact idea, concept, verbiage that removes us from what's important. Do what's important to you, but if that's the thing that you fixate on, if that's where your mind wanders off to in a discussion like this, when all is almost lost, when the ship is about to be dashed upon the rocks, when the wildfires are sweeping down from the hills, and there is a small contingent of people capable that have the skill set, which is you, of affecting change in a meaningful way, doing the same game that they have been doing for years. Who's they? It's the people that want things the way they want it. That's not wrong of them. They might be rich, they might be poor, but they want it that way. That is what our Constitution allows them to do, and we've bought into it. We have, through apathy, through laziness, through dereliction in our duty as members of this republic, allowed it to happen. You've allowed it to happen. While we sit here idly, our brothers are already in the fields. What say you? Challenges. Go read that entire speech of Patrick Henry. Go read it. Go read Thomas Paine. Go read it. Go read about Glover and the Marbleheaders. Read about Knox in his noble train. The same power that coursed through those men's hearts and veins and minds is the same power that courses through you. They believed in themselves. That power is not gone. It's not gone. Very basics of thermodynamics. Matter cannot be created or destroyed, right? It's only changes forms. That same juice, that same energy, it's still here. Channel it. I'm not saying channel their spirit, that same energy. Stuff that's in me is going to be spread to the far corners of the planet. Everything that's here was always here. That energy is still here. Harness it, capture it, read about them. Fight on. Fight up. Be the father, the mother that you want your children to one day tell their children about. Who was my dad? Who was my mom? He fought up. He didn't quit. He fought up. What was Grandpa like? He fought up. That's you. Send me a message if you want to talk about this stuff more. If this was important to you, if this talk illuminated anything in any way, send me a message. Shoot something in the comment section. I got to get my gi and get over to the gym. Fight up. I dig you. Be well. Don't be dickheads.